Hey guys! So today we are answering a subscriber question, and the question in question is, Frederick, how do we hire a good tester, or what do you think a good tester is? So let's get into it. Well, this is one of those controversial ones, unfortunately, where I have to express an opinion that is not going to sit all that well with all that many people. You see, I will argue that for most companies, hiring a dedicated tester is actually the wrong way to go. Now, just let me explain. The reason why I argue that is that it's very rare that you have the sort of company size and the sort of needs where a fully dedicated tester is going to be as productive as having something as we call a developer in test. In other words, a developer whose focus is to oversee the testing process, quality assurance, making sure that you have support for automated testing and all of this stuff. And the reason why this is the way, in my experience, the way to go is because you will get a linear return on investment for every tester that you add to your company. If you add a tester to your company who has absolutely no idea how to write software, what's going to happen is that that person is at best going to be able to do the manual testing process. But that will only sustain you to a certain point, because unless you have a very good and strong strategy for how to automate more, like basically a lot of the regression testing that you're going to have to do, you're going to fill up the quota very quickly. That person is going to at best be able to test some part of the system in a reasonable amount of time, and before you know it, you need 2 testers and then 3 testers, and I mean it kind of goes on and on and on. And for a really large company, maybe that is okay, because some things are truly tricky to automate. But for most companies, I will argue that it's a much better approach to have a developer in test, because even if you say that you practice TDD, test-driven development and all that good stuff, that is not going to be enough for a growing system. You're going to have integration tests. You're going to have a strategy for doing end-to-end testing if you want to automate the closest thing to production level systems, if you will, when the system is running in production. In order for you to be able to do this, you need a way to actually write these tests. And sure, you can absolutely say that the developers should do this, and I think they should, but the problem is that, in my experience, it's very rare that this is a sustainable strategy unless you have somebody who's actually driving it, because the fact of the matter is that even if you start doing testing today, odds are that you haven't been writing end-to-end tests for every part of the system, and it's actually very tricky to find the time to both develop features and to cover every single one of those features with automated testing. And then you have scalability issues, where as the test suite grows, you will find that it's actually tricky to make it run in an efficient manner, and all these tiny little problems starts to pile up as part of the testing process. And having a developer who can, in an autonomous way, solve those problems, set up automation tools and all this good stuff, is invaluable, especially if you have something like third-party dependencies. If you have an external system that you need to integrate to, having a developer who understands how to write custom testing tools, such as helping you create a test bubble, and the basic idea here is that you create a service that simulates the third party, and you can then isolate your application from those third parties while you're running your end-to-end tests, which is a very useful thing. All of these things you can get from a developer in test, but you can't get them from a tester, like a purebred tester, because a purebred tester is not a programmer. And although that is not a hard requirement to be a good tester, I will argue that it is immensely valuable to have that. I will actually go as far as to say that I think that the most valuable people when it comes to quality assurance are the people who understand quality assurance but have the programming skills to actually execute on one of the most useful things we can provide to a company in terms of testing, which is automation, because testing takes a lot of time. So when I look at the tester and I try to figure out whether or not they're good at what they do and so forth, you will have to think about the base cases first and foremost. And if you have existing bugs, if you're hiring a tester of some sort, it's a very good idea to have them look at your system and see if they can figure out if find quality issues with the product that you are actually maintaining, because you probably know that your system isn't perfect and you know what issues there are. And a good tester will not just cover the common cases. I mean, I would expect a tester to cover the basic stuff, trying input fields, trying different, the basic security things, trying to input too many characters, not enough characters, trying to basically try the common cases for how to go through, say, a purchase flow. But a really good tester also tests the corner cases, because the base cases most likely are already covered by a developer while they're actually doing the actual development. But it's not as common that developers take the time to actually really try out the corner cases on top of that. Other things that you should look out for is that make sure that they understand the platform they are working with. So if you have a tester for, say, a web application, I would expect them to, as part of their testing process, understand how to test in different browsers, understand how to, what responsive design is, and how to test on different screen widths, different devices, and these sorts of things. I mean, these are like the bare bone basics. But apart from these things, the most vital thing is that they understand have a work process where they understand that the end goal for them is to make themselves as redundant as possible. In other words, their end goal as a good tester should not be to just sit there and do the manual testing. They should have a good understanding of that the most valuable thing for the company is to help with automation as much as possible, because they know that they won't be able to sustain just testing manually forever. It's just a matter of time before the system grows too large. So a tester who understands that and has a good strategy for setting up processes around quality assurance, because as a tester, honestly, it's a bit of a political game for you, quite a lot, because you need to be that person that convinces people who have a work process to start changing those work processes in favor of quality, and that usually results in lower productivity. So finding a strategy for how to find that sweet spot where people are okay with lowering their productivity in favor of raising the quality of the product is absolutely vital, and that's not an easy conversation to have. So what I want you to take away from this is that when it comes to good testers, a good tester in my world is a developer in test. It's a person who understands the value of automation and understands how to actually make this happen. And apart from having an understanding of the basics of testing, mobile development, responsive design, testing in various browsers on different devices, testing like the corner cases for how an application works, and of course some basic security testing as well, I think that the most important aspect to consider with a good tester is that they understand how the life cycle rather how this is going to end by the time they get their hands really dirty. And that is that they basically need to have this idea of automating things as much as possible. So they need themselves to understand that their job is to introduce as much of that as possible, because, as I said, otherwise you're just going to have a linear return on your testers, and that's it's not a sustainable model to work after. It's just a matter of time before it fails. So having a tester that understands the value of having a good quality assurance process and pushes for automation is probably the best sort of person that you can go for. Have a great day.